He told her she was nothing without his name. He laughed as she left for her little errands, tossing a black Amex on the marble table, telling her not to break a nail. He was Mateo Blackwood, a titan of industry. She was Elara, his quiet, beautiful trophy wife. He was obsessed with being the main sponsor of the city's most exclusive event, the Starlight Gala. But a mystery benefactor outbid him, and tonight, in front of everyone who matters, he's about to see his quiet little wife step into the spotlight and utterly destroy him. The penthouse was silent, but not peaceful. It was the sterile, oppressive silence of a museum, a place where things were looked at, but never touched. From 70 floors above the Upper East Side, the sounds of New York City were a distant, irrelevant hum. Mateo Blackwood stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of Macallan 25 in one hand, his phone pressed so hard to his ear it might have fused with his skull. "What do you mean, outbid?" He snarled, his voice a low vibration that rattled the crystal paperweight on his desk. "This is the Starlight Gala, not a high school bake sale. You find out who it is. I don't care if it's Musk Bezos or the Pope. Everyone has a price. Find theirs, then double it." He listened for a moment, his face tightening. "An anonymous benefactor wishes to remain private. Don't give me that garbage. Find them. I want that sponsorship. Blackwood Capital will be the name on that stage. Handle it." He ended the call without a goodbye, slamming the phone onto its cradle. He turned his Tom Ford suit, uncreased his anger, a perfectly tailored accessory. His eyes fell on his wife, Elara. Elara Blackwood was sitting in the pearl-white armchair by the cold, modern fireplace, tending to a phalaenopsis orchid. She was, as always, beautiful. Her pale blonde hair was pulled back in a simple chignon. She wore cream-colored cashmere trousers and a matching silk blouse. To Mateo, she was the most expensive and least interesting acquisition he had ever made. "Did you hear any of that?" he demanded. Elara looked up, her grey eyes clear and calm. "I heard you shouting Mateo. It's hard to miss. I'm talking about the gala, the Starlight Gala, the single most important philanthropic event of the year, the one I've been structuring a deal around for 6 months, and some nobody waltzes in and snatches the main sponsorship. Perhaps they simply believe in the cause," Elara said, softly, her fingers gently adjusting a stake for the orchid. The cause was funding STEM education for underprivileged girls. Mateo let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor, like metal striking flint. "Believe in the cause, darling, please. This isn't about charity. It's about positioning. It's about having the Mayor Senator Albright and every venture capitalist on the eastern seaboard see the Blackwood name synonymous with a $100 million philanthropic drive. And you," he said, pointing a finger, "you just sit there with your flowers." Elara stood, brushing a speck of potting soil from her trousers. "The flowers need care. They can't care for themselves." Profound. He loosened his tie, his frustration needing a new target. "While I'm trying to salvage our entire fourth quarter, what's on your grand agenda today? A fitting at Bergdorf's, a 2-hour lunch at Le Bernardin. With those other vacuous wives, I have some errands to run," she said simply. "I'll be out for a few hours." "Errands," he scoffed again, the sound truly dismissive this time. He walked to the massive marble island that separated the living area from the kitchen he'd never once used. He pulled his wallet, a sleek black alligator skin piece, and retrieved an Amex Centurion card. The black card. He spun it across the marble counter. It skidded to a stop in front of her. "Go. Buy a new car, a new face, whatever it is you do. he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Try not to break a nail. God knows you're useless if you aren't decorative." This was their routine. His stress, his condescension, her quiet acceptance. Elara looked at the black card. She didn't move to take it. "I have my own." "Oh, right. Your little allowance," he said with a smirk. He thought of the generous 5-figure allowance he wired to her account monthly, the one she supposedly used for her clothes and her little charity lunches. He imagined it was all spent before the first of the month. Something like that. She agreed. She walked past him, grabbing her simple, unbranded leather tote from the hall closet. "Elara, wait." She paused, her hand on the door. "Tonight, the pre-gala reception at the Astor Linns. Don't be late. And for God's sake, wear the diamonds I bought you in Geneva. The yellow ones. I need to at least look like I have a wife who appreciates what she has." "I'll be there, Matteo," she said. Her hand, perfectly manicured, without his help, closed around the doorknob. "And Elara," he called out, already turning back to the window, his mind on his next call. "Yes. Try to look engaged. Try to look like you understand the world you live in. It reflects on me." The door closed with a soft, expensive click. Matteo Blackwood sighed, picked up his Macallan, and looked out over his city. He was the king, and she was just a pawn. He didn't even register the flash of icy-cold resolve in her eyes before she'd turned away. He didn't see it, because he had never, not once in their 5 years of marriage, truly looked at her. He saw a reflection. He saw a dependent. He saw, as he'd told his rival Marcus Thorne over golf, a beautiful, simple, well-bred girl from a good family that had lost its money. The perfect wife. No opinions, no ambition, just looks and breeding. He laughed at her. He laughed at her errands. He had no idea that Elara Blackwood had just walked out of her gilded cage and was now heading into her empire. Elara did not hail the doorman for the House Bentley. She walked 2 blocks east toward Lexington Avenue, melting into the mid-morning foot traffic of assistants grabbing coffee and tourists looking lost. She hailed a yellow cab, an anonymous, unremarkable act. "Where to?" Lady the driver asked, not even looking back. "Corner of Spring and Varick." "Soho," she replied. The penthouse on the Upper East Side was her prison. The city was her freedom. As the cab lurched into the flow of traffic, Elara's entire demeanor shifted. The soft, placid mask of Mrs. Blackwood dissolved. Her posture straightened. She pulled a slim, encrypted Stark Industries model smartphone from her tote, one Matteo had never seen, and began to type. Her fingers flew across the screen. "Julian. Traffic? ETA 10 minutes. Push the Tenhoto AM with the Tokyo Consortium to 10:15. I want the final Q3 reports on my desk before I walk in, and I want a triple shot cappuccino. Black. Waiting for you. Ms. Vance." The reply came instantly. 40 minutes later, the cab pulled up to an old 8-story brick building. It was classic Soho architecture, unassuming with a cast-iron facade painted a discreet charcoal grey. The ground floor was an obscure art gallery. There was no gleaming sign, no corporate logo. The only indication of its occupant was a small, sand-blasted brass plate next to a steel door, VA Holdings. Elara swiped a keycard. The steel door buzzed open, revealing not a lobby, but a high-speed private elevator. She stepped in, placed her thumb on a biometric scanner, and the elevator began its silent ascent. The doors opened onto a space that was the complete antithesis of her penthouse. It was a sprawling, open-plan office, buzzing with quiet, focused energy. Exposed brick, reclaimed timber beams, and cutting-edge technology coexisted. Dozens of analysts and developers sat at vast, curved monitors, their faces illuminated by streams of code and market data. This was the headquarters of Vance Ethel. Good morning, Miss Vance. Morning, Sarah. Morning, Ben. Not Miss Blackwood. Here she was, Miss Vance. A tall man in a sharp, dark blue suit, his hair a distinguished silver at the temples, met her at the elevator with a tablet and a steaming paper cup. This was Julian Hayes, her COO, her mentor, and the only person on Earth who knew her full story. Julian. Thank you, she said, taking the coffee. Report. Good, he said, falling into step as they walked toward her glass-walled office. The Tokyo deal is solid. They're just nervous about the regulatory hurdles in Germany. Your 10:15 call will smooth them over. The Q3s are on your desk. We beat projections by 9%. 9, I expected 12, she said, not unkindly. The TerraTech acquisition is slowing us down. It's a cash-heavy play. Which brings me to the next point, Matteo Blackwood. Elara stopped her hand on her office door. What about him? Blackwood Capital has been sniffing around TerraTech for the last 48 hours. Aggressively. They're trying to structure a leveraged buyout. TerraTech was a struggling but brilliant startup in Arizona that had just patented a revolutionary water purification system, one that could desalinate water with 90% less energy. It was a game changer. He's not buying TerraTech. Elara said, her voice flat. He's putting on the pressure. He sees it as a distressed asset, a quick flip. It's not a flip. It's the future, Elara said. She walked into her office and sat behind a massive desk of reclaimed oak. He thinks in quarters, Julian. We think in decades. Finalize our offer. 30% above his. All cash. Close it by end of day. I want the press release ready for tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, Elara, the Starlight Gala is tomorrow night. I know, she said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. And so is the big announcement. Julian paused, a rare look of concern on his face. He was in his late 50s, a former investment banker who had worked with Elara's father. Are you sure about this? The timing. The gala. You've kept Vance Ethel and Elara Blackwood separate for 5 years. Once this bell is rung, you can't unring it. He will know everything. Elara spun in her chair to look out the window. Her view wasn't of Central Park. It was of the rooftops of Soho, of industry of creation. He called me decorative Julian. He laughed at my errands. He thinks the woman he married is a simple-minded doll who exists to wear his diamonds and host his dinners. Her story was one of careful, deliberate construction. Her father, Dr. Aris Vance, was a brilliant, eccentric engineer. He'd invented the core algorithm for a new type of sustainable energy grid, but died penniless and in debt, his patents collecting dust. Elara, with her quiet brilliance in mathematics and finance, saw what her father's legacy was worth. When she met Matteo, he was the rising star of Blackwood Capital. He was charmed by her beauty and her good old money maiden name, not knowing the money was long gone. He saw her as a project, a beautiful painting to hang in his penthouse. When she'd once tried to show him her father's patents, he'd patted her on the head. Leave the business to me, darling. It's too complicated for you. That was the day Vance Ethel was born. She'd used the last of her father's seed money, found private funding from investors in Zurich and Singapore, who didn't know Matteo Blackwood, and built her company in secret. Vance Ethel, Ethel meaning noble in Old English, a noble legacy. In 5 years, she had turned those patents into a green tech and sustainable investment fund worth billions. She was the anonymous benefactor, the silent partner in dozens of tech unicorns. She operated through Julian, through shell corporations, and through a simple, unshakable secrecy. Her life with Matteo was a performance. Her work was her reality. He needs to know, Elara said, turning back to Julian. He needs to see. And the gala, Julian asked. The sponsorship is confirmed. Anonymous benefactor, as requested. But they'll announce you before the main address. I know. I've already sent my bio to Mrs. Astor Lynn's team. Under my name. Your name, Julian's eyebrows shot up. Elara Vance. Yes, he thinks Elara Vance died 5 years ago and became Mrs. Blackwood. He's about to find out Miss Vance has been very, very busy. This is more than business, Elara. This is a detonation. It's a reckoning, Julian, she corrected him. He laughed at me. He told me I was nothing without his name. Tomorrow night, I'm giving him his name back. Matteo Blackwood was not having a good day. After his morning tirade, he'd gone to his office, a cavern of black marble and smoked glass in Midtown, only to find more problems. His bid for the Starlight Gala sponsorship hadn't just been outbid, it had been eclipsed. They didn't just beat our offer, sir, his nervous VP of marketing said, wiping a sheen of sweat from his forehead. Our offer was 20 million. The confirmed sponsorship is for 50 million. Matteo's blood ran cold. 50. In one check wired in full this morning, from a private holding company. Swiss. Untraceable for now. Mrs. Astor Lynn said she's never seen anything like it. They're naming the entire new STEM wing after, well, they don't know who yet. The benefactor is being revealed at the gala. 50 million. That wasn't just a donation. It was a statement. It was a power play that dwarfed his own. Blackwood Capital could have afforded it, but it would have been a strain. The company was over-leveraged. Matteo had made a series of aggressive, risky bets on commercial real estate, and the market was turning. He needed the positive purr from the gala to calm his investors. Now he wouldn't just be absent from the stage. He'd be the guy who got publicly humiliated. He spent the rest of the day in a controlled fury. He yelled at his traders. He demanded impossible deadlines. And he kept thinking about TerraTech. If he could just acquire that water purification patent, he could spin it off, create a green subsidiary, and change the narrative. "Get me Robert Hines at TerraTech," he barked at his assistant. A minute later, she buzzed back. "So Mr. Hines is unavailable. His assistant says they are in a priority meeting." "With who?" Matteo growled. She wouldn't say, sir. Just that they were finalizing an acquisition and wouldn't be available for the rest of the week. Matteo slammed his fist on the desk. First the gala, now this. He felt a rare, unwelcome prickle of panic. It felt like sand slipping through his fingers. That evening, he arrived at the pre-gala reception at the Astor Lynn estate in a foul mood. Elara was already there as promised. She was standing by a towering floral arrangement, speaking quietly with Senator Albright. She was wearing the yellow diamonds. They were, he noted with detached approval, spectacular. She looked the part. "Elara," he said, striding up and placing a possessive hand on the small of her back. "Senator, good to see you." "Matteo," the senator smiled. "I was just congratulating your wife. Her passion for the Starlight Foundation's work is truly inspiring." Matteo laughed. "Oh, Elara. She loves her charities, keeps her busy." Elara's smile didn't waver, but her eyes when she met Matteo's were like chips of ice. "Matteo, you remember Mrs. Astor Lynn?" The older woman, the queen bee of New York philanthropy, drifted over. "Matteo, darling, we were so sorry to hear your bid didn't work out. But we're just thrilled with our new sponsor. Absolutely thrilled." "Yes, 50 million. Quite a statement," Matteo said, forcing a smile. "Any word on who it is? I'm dying to congratulate them." "Oh, it's a her," Mrs. Astor Lynn whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. "That's all I can tell you. A her. And she is, well, she's a force of nature. Utterly brilliant, and so private. This is her first major public appearance. We're seating you at her table tomorrow night, right next to her. You'll be the first to meet her." A her. Matteo's mind instantly cycled through the short list of female titans. Serafina Rodriguez of Apollo Global, Maria Smith of Smith Industries. He relaxed. This was good. He could network. He could turn this to his advantage. It was probably Serafina. He'd heard she was making a move into green tech. He glanced at Elara. She was listening politely, a picture of domestic grace. She hadn't bought a new face, but she'd clearly spent his allowance well. He felt a swell of pride, not in her, but in his ability to own her. He leaned down and whispered in her ear, "See, this is how it's done. Even when we lose, we get a seat at the head table. You just stand there, smile, and let me do the talking tomorrow night. Maybe I can spin this disaster into a partnership with this new mystery woman." Elara looked up at him. Her expression was placid, but there was a depth to her gaze he'd never seen before. "I'm sure you'll be fascinating, Matteo," she said. Later that night, back at the penthouse, the facade cracked. Matteo agitated by the gossip, and the pressure poured another Macallan. Elara was in the library reading. He hated when she read. It felt accusatory. "You were quiet tonight," he said, standing in the doorway. "I was listening," she replied, not looking up from her book. "Listening to what the senator—" "He was just being polite, Elara. He doesn't actually care about your opinion on whatever it is you talk about. Flowers, table settings." She carefully placed a bookmark and closed the book. The title on the spine read, "Principles of Advanced Water Desalination." He didn't notice. "You really don't see me at all, do you?" she asked. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple clinical observation. "I see a wife who has everything," he snapped. "A penthouse overlooking the park, a black card with no limit, a name that opens every door in this city, and I get nothing in return. Just a warm body in a pretty dress." "Nothing," she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "I run your household. I manage your social calendar. I host your investors. I sit through dinners with men whose hands linger too long on my back, all to help you close your deals. I have smiled until my face ached, and I have never, not once, embarrassed you. You don't call that something. I call that the job," he spat. "The job you signed up for when you married me. You came from nothing, Elara. Your family name was Mud. Your father was a bankrupt dreamer who died with holes in his shoes. I gave you my name. I gave you this." He swept his arm around the opulent room. Elara stood up. She was trembling, but not with fear. It was a tightly coiled, white-hot rage that he mistook for weakness. "You're right, Matteo," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You gave me this. You gave me this cage. You gave me this name." She walked past him. He grabbed her arm. "Where are you going? I'm not finished." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up to his face. Her expression was one he would later replay in his nightmares. It was pure, unadulterated pity. "Yes, you are, Matteo," she said, pulling her arm from his grasp. "You just don't know it yet. Remember you said that. Remember you said I was nothing but a name. Remember you said I came from nothing." She went into their bedroom and closed the door. He heard the lock click. He stood there baffled and furious. The arrogance of the woman. He'd have to remind her forcefully of her place, but first he had to prepare. He spent the rest of the night researching Serafina Rodriguez. He had to be ready to pitch a partnership. He had to salvage his company. He fell asleep in his study at 4:00 a.m., surrounded by financial reports, convinced he was preparing for the battle of his life. He was right. He was just preparing for the wrong opponent. The morning of the Starlight Gala dawned clear and cold. Matteo Blackwood woke in his study, a crick in his neck and a sour taste in his mouth. He'd dreamt of falling. He showered, dressed in his custom-made Brioni workout gear, and headed for his private gym, only to find Elara gone. A note was on the kitchen counter. Not a note, really. A post-it. "Have a fitting. We'll see you at the gala. E." "A fitting," he muttered, crumpling the note. "Of course." On the most important day of his quarter, she was off playing dress-up. He felt a flash of irritation at her coldness from the night before, but it was quickly subsumed by his own anxieties. Today was all about TerraTech. He arrived at his office by 7:00 a.m. "Get Hines at TerraTech on the phone. Now. I don't care if he's in a meeting. Tell his assistant I'm prepared to make an all-cash offer 20% over market value. Tell him Blackwood Capital is ready to move. Today." His assistant, pale and nervous, already had the information. "Sir, I'm afraid it's too late. It just hit the wires. TerraTech was acquired." Matteo froze. Acquired by who? Serafina. That rival firm in Chicago. "We don't know, sir. It was a private holding company, VA Holdings. The deal was finalized late last night. All cash, 35% over market value. They completely blindsided us, sir." VA Holdings. Matteo racked his brain. "I've never heard of them. Get me a full workup. Find out who they are. Who's on their board? Who's their CEO? I want a name, and I want it now." This was a catastrophe. TerraTech was his lifeline. It was his pivot. Without it, his portfolio looked dangerously unbalanced. His investors would be spooked. The panic he'd felt earlier returned this time as a cold dread. He was losing control. Across town, Elara Vance was not at a fitting. She was in the boardroom of Vance Ethel, signing the final document that concluded the $4.8 billion acquisition of TerraTech. "It's done," Julian Hayes said, taking the pen from her. "Congratulations, Ms. Vance. You just cornered the market on sustainable water technology." Elara leaned back, allowing herself a small, satisfied smile. "My father's dream," she said quietly. "He always said you could save the world with clean water. Now we can." "The press release is queued," Julian said. "As requested, it will go live at 8:00 p.m. tonight, right as the speeches at the gala begin." "Good," Elara said. I've also instructed Mrs. Astor Lynn's team. My speech will follow the announcement of the Terra Tech Initiative. You're announcing the acquisition at the Gala. Julian looked stunned. That's aggressive. You're not just revealing yourself, you're throwing down a gauntlet. Blackwood Capital isn't the only shark in the water, Julian. It's time the others learned my name. She stood and smoothed her blouse. Now I actually do have a fitting. Her fitting was not at Bergdorf's. It was at a private, unmarked atelier in the West Village, run by a single reclusive designer known only as Madame Seraphine. Seraphine dressed royalty and billionaires who didn't want their names in vogue. "Ah, Miss Vance," the designer, an elegant woman in her 70s, said as Elara entered. "It is ready." Hanging in the center of the room was not a dress. It was a statement. It was not the pale, muted colors Matteo preferred. It was a deep, breathtaking sapphire blue, crafted from a heavy silk that seemed to drink the light. The cut was severe and elegant, a high, structured neckline, long sleeves, and a column skirt that pooled at the floor. It was the dress of a CEO, a monarch. It was a suit of armor. "It's perfect, Seraphine," Elara breathed. "You are not attending as a wife?" Madame Seraphine observed, her eye sharp. "You are attending as a warrior." "Today they are one and the same," Elara replied. Matteo spent the day in a black fog. His research team had hit a brick wall. VA Holdings was a ghost. It was a labyrinth of international shells registered in Switzerland, managed out of Delaware with its primary funds in a Singapore trust. It was impenetrable. "There must be a name," he roared. "The only name we can find is the signatory on the SEC filings, sir. A man named Julian Hayes. He's a lawyer. Seems to be the COO. But the UBO, the ultimate beneficial owner, is sealed in a blind trust." Matteo was stumped. He was furious. He was, for the first time in his professional life, completely outmaneuvered. He went home at 6 to change. The penthouse was silent. Elara's dress bag was hanging on the closet door. It was from Chanel. Or so he thought. Elara had been clever. She'd had her assistant pick up a decoy dress from Chanel, one she would wear to the gala, only to change at the last minute. The real dress from Madame Seraphine was already waiting for her in a private suite at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the gala was being held. Matteo looked at the Chanel bag. "I hope you got something decent," he muttered to the empty room. "After last night, you owe me." He put on his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. He fastened his Patek Philippe watch. He looked in the mirror. He was Matteo Blackwood. He was a king. He'd been wrong-footed, yes, but tonight he would sit next to the new power player in New York, the mystery woman. He would charm her. He would find out what she wanted. He would forge an alliance. He could still turn this. He was so focused on the new unknown woman, he never once thought about the woman he already knew. Approx 1,300 words. The Temple of Dendur at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. Bathed in ethereal blue and gold light, the ancient sandstone temple served as a backdrop for the most powerful people in the world. Waiters in white tuxedos moved silently with trays of vintage Dom Perignon. The quiet buzz of conversation was a symphony of mergers, politics, and art. The Blackwoods' Rolls-Royce Phantom purred to a stop at the base of the museum's grand staircase. Paparazzi flashes erupted. "Matteo Blackwood! Mr. Blackwood!" Matteo stepped out, radiating confidence. He adjusted his bow tie and turned to help his wife. Elara emerged, and he gave her a quick, appraising glance. She was wearing the Chanel dress, a perfectly acceptable, elegant, but ultimately safe black sequined number. She looked beautiful and forgettable, his perfect accessory. "Good," he whispered, taking her arm. "You look fine." "Thank you, Matteo," she replied, her voice smooth. They ascended the steps, Matteo nodding to his peers, Elara smiling demurely. Inside the great hall, the air was warm and thick with the scent of lilies. Mrs. Astor Lynn, draped in emeralds, rushed toward them. "Matteo, Elara." "You're here, Mrs. Astor Lynn," Matteo said, kissing her cheek. "A stunning event, as always." "Just wait," she beamed. "Now, Elara, darling, I need to steal you for a moment. We have the private donors' reception in the Sackler wing. Mr. Blackwood," she said, turning to Matteo. "Your table is right at the front, table 1. You're right next to the podium. You'll have the best seat in the house." Matteo felt a thrill. "Excellent. And our sponsor. She'll be there." "Oh, yes," Mrs. Astor Lynn said, her eyes twinkling. "She's preparing. Now, Elara, come with me." Matteo watched Elara walk away, with the event host a pang of annoyance hitting him. "Probably to review the silent auction items," he muttered. He smoothed his tuxedo and made his way into the Temple of Dendur. His table was as promised, front and center. He saw the place cards: Mayor Johnson, Senator Albright, Serafina Rodriguez, and right next to his own, a blank card that simply read, "Our honored guest." "Matteo!" a voice boomed. Matteo turned to see his rival Marcus Thorne, a broad, boisterous man who ran a rival equity firm. "Marcus, good to see you," Matteo said, forcing a smile. "Is it—" Marcus laughed, clapping Matteo on the shoulder. "Heard you got kicked to the curb on the sponsorship and on Terra Tech, both in 24 hours. That's got a sting, Blackwood." "I pivot, Marcus. You know that. I'm already in talks with the new sponsor. We're at the same table." Matteo lied smoothly. "Oh, are you? Well, I'm eager to see who this mystery woman is. She's got this whole city in a spin." Marcus moved on, and Matteo sat his jaw tight. Meanwhile, Elara was not at a donor's reception. Mrs. Astor Lynn had personally escorted her to a private museum office that had been converted into a dressing room. Her team was there: Julian Hayes, a publicist, and her personal assistant. Hanging on the door was the sapphire blue dress from Madame Seraphine. "Are you ready, Miss Vance?" Julian asked, handing her a folder. Elara slipped out of the decoy Chanel dress. "The speech," she said, taking the folder. "It's just the bullet points you requested, and the final press release. It's scheduled to go live in 10 minutes. Elara nodded, slipping into the heavy silk. It felt cool against her skin. Her assistant helped with the zipper, and as it rose, Elara felt her transformation complete. She was no longer Mrs. Blackwood. She stood in front of the mirror. The dress was magnificent. It was the color of a deep ocean, the color of power. Her assistant undid her simple chignon, and her blonde hair fell to her shoulders. It was brushed back, sleek and severe. She put on her real jewelry, not Matteo's yellow diamonds. It was a modern architectural necklace of white gold and raw-cut diamonds, a piece she had commissioned herself from a designer in Antwerp. She looked formidable. "Good," she said, her voice a low, steady hum. "It's time." Back in the Gala, the lights began to dim. The chatter subsided. Matteo sat straighter, checking his Patek Philippe. 7:59 p.m. At that exact moment, in every newsroom and trading floor in the world, an alert pinged. Businesses wire, VA Holdings. A private green tech fund acquires TerraTech in 4.8B. All cash deal. Initiative to be announced at Starlight Gala. Mateo's phone vibrated on the table. So did Serafina Rodriguez's. So did Marcus Thorne's. A collective murmur went through the room as dozens of high-profile guests read the alert. Mateo's eyes widened in horror. VA Holdings, the ghost, they were here. This was the sponsor. His head whipped around, scanning the room. Who was it? Who was VA Holdings? On stage, Mrs. Astor Lynn tapped the microphone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Tonight we have shattered every record in the history of the Starlight Foundation. We have done so thanks to the vision and unparalleled generosity of one person. Mateo was sweating. His heart was hammering. This was it. This person is to me the very definition of a modern visionary. Someone who built an empire not for fame, but for the future. You all just received the business alert. You know what she did. Now you get to see who she is. Mateo leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the stage. She is the founder and CEO of Vance Ethel, the parent company of VA Holdings. She is the mind that just secured the future of clean water. It is my profound personal honor to introduce our main sponsor, our benefactor, and my dear friend, Ms. Elara Vance. The name hung in the air, suspended in the stunned, cavernous silence of the Temple of Denda. Elara. Vance. Mateo Blackwood's brain refused to process the syllables. It was a glitch, a misprint, a terrible echoing mistake. Vance. That was her maiden name. A name that meant nothing. A name synonymous with dusty libraries and forgotten patents. He turned to his left, where the honored guest chair sat empty. He turned to his right, to Serafina Rodriguez, who was staring at him with a look of utter electrifying confusion. What did she say? Mateo whispered, his mouth dry. She said, Elara Vance. Serafina whispered back, her eyes darting to the stage. A single brilliant white spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the stage-left entrance. And there she was. It was not the woman who had left his penthouse that morning. It was not the demure wife in the safe Chanel dress. This was a different being inwardly. The woman who walked onto the stage was a queen. The sapphire dress seemed to have been spun from the night sky itself, clinging to her form, with an authority that stunned the room. The raw diamond necklace at her throat caught the light and shattered it into 1,000 tiny daggers. Her hair was pulled back, emphasizing the severe, intelligent beauty of her face. Her walk was not a drift, it was a stride. Confident, measured, and utterly terrifying. She was Elara. But she was not his Elara. A disbelieving murmur rippled through the crowd. Is that? That's Elara Blackwood. Vance Ethel. I've heard of them. They're monsters in the green tech space. They're bigger than... That's his wife. Mateo felt the blood drain from his face. The room tilted. Every eye in that 200-person hall, the senators, the mayors, the billionaires, his rivals, was on him. He could feel their gazes like physical blows. He was the center of attention, but as the object of a joke he had never been told. Marcus Thorne, 2 tables over, was staring, his jaw literally open, a piece of bread halfway to his mouth. On stage, Elara reached the podium. She adjusted the microphone, the sound echoing in the silence. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over them, calm and commanding. Then her eyes found Mateo's. She looked right at him. Table 1. The best seat in the house. There was no malice in her gaze, no anger, no triumph. There was something far, far worse: indifference. It was the look a geologist might give a common rock before stepping over it. In that single 3-second stare, Matteo Blackwood ceased to exist for her. "Thank you, Mrs. Astor Lynn," Elara's voice rang out. It wasn't the soft, agreeable murmur he was used to. It was a clear, crisp, confident alto. A CEO's voice. A voice that closed billion-dollar deals. "My father, Dr. Aris Vance, was a brilliant man," she began. "He believed that true innovation wasn't about profit, it was about legacy. He dreamed of a world where technology served humanity, not the other way around. But he was a dreamer, not a businessman. He died with pennies in his pocket, and a mind full of dreams that the world told him were worthless." Matteo remembered his own words, sneered in the library. "Your father was a bankrupt dreamer who died with holes in his shoes." He felt a cold spike of nausea. "For the past 5 years," Elara continued, "I have worked to make those dreams a reality. I founded Vance Ethel with a simple mission to fund the future, to find the brilliant minds the world has overlooked and give them the resources to change the world." She was Vance Ethel, VA Holdings, V.A. Elara Vance. It was so simple. It was so obvious. It had been right in front of him, sleeping in his bed for 5 years, and he had been laughing at her. "My father's greatest unfinished work," she went on, "was in water purification. He believed that access to clean water was not a privilege, but a fundamental human right." Matteo stopped breathing. "No. That is why I am so thrilled to announce tonight that my company Vance Ethel has completed its acquisition of TerraTech." The room gasped. This wasn't just a donation speech. It was a market-moving announcement. Serafina Rodriguez shot Matteo a look that was half pity, half unholy respect for his wife. She bought it," Matteo choked out. The company he was hunting, the company that was his lifeline. His quiet, simple wife had bought it out from under him while she was supposedly at a fitting. "Effective immediately," Elara announced. "Vance Ethel is open-sourcing the core TerraTech patent. It will be made available free of charge to the Starlight Foundation and any non-profit organization working to bring clean water to developing nations. That is my father's legacy. That is the future we are funding." She didn't need the profit from the patent. She was giving it away. She wasn't just richer than him. She was in a different league. He played for profit. She played for power. A standing ovation began a rolling wave of thunder that shook the ancient temple. Senator Albright was on his feet. The mayor was on his feet. Serafina Rodriguez was on her feet, clapping with genuine admiration. Matteo remained seated frozen. He was a statue in a Tom Ford suit. He was paralyzed by the sheer scale of his own stupidity. His allowance, her errands, his condescension, his laughter. "Try not to break a nail. You are nothing without my name." A beautiful, simple, well-bred girl. His entire life was a lie. He wasn't the king. He was the court jester in his own home, and the entire world had just found out. Elara raised her hand, and the applause slowly died down. "Thank you," she said. She smiled a real radiant smile that Matteo had never seen. It was not meant for him. It was meant for her audience, her peers. She concluded her speech, gathered her notes, and walked off the stage. She didn't look at him again. The lights came up. The buzz in the room was electric. But no one was talking about the foundation. They were all talking about Elara Vance, and they were all looking at Matteo Blackwood. He sat there, the spotlight gone, as the first person finally approached his table. It was Marcus Thorne. He walked over slowly, picked up Matteo's untouched glass of Dom Perignon, and raised it in a toast. "Well, Blackwood," Marcus said, his voice laced with a brutal, mocking pity, "you finally did it. You're married to the most powerful person in the room." He took a sip. "Amazing. All this time we thought you were the shark." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Turns out you were just the bait." The rest of the gala was a blur of humiliation for Matteo. He was a ghost at his own funeral. The seat next to him, the honored guest seat, his wife's seat, remained empty. Elara, as Miss Vance, was not sitting down. She was holding court. Matteo watched as if from a great distance, as a gravitational pull formed around her. The mayor was laughing at something she said. Senator Albright had a hand on her arm, speaking with earnest intensity. Serafina Rodriguez, the woman he had planned to pitch, was waiting in line to speak to her, looking impressed. No one spoke to Matteo. No one even made eye contact. He was irrelevant. The name Blackwood, which he had thrown in Elara's face as her single greatest asset, was now a footnote to Vance. He wanted to flee. He wanted to scream. But he was trapped, pinned to his chair by the weight of 1,000 judgments. He stayed until the bitter end, drinking glass after glass of champagne, the bubbles tasting like ash. The ride home was in the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The silence in the car was louder than any argument they had ever had. Elara Ms. Vance sat across from him. She wasn't looking out the window. She was on her encrypted Stark phone, her thumb scrolling through what he now knew were not social media feeds, but market reports. "Congratulations," he finally said. The word came out like broken glass. She didn't look up. For what? The performance, the speech, Vance Ethel. It was quite a show. She finally locked her phone and placed it in her bag. She looked at him, and her eyes were empty. "It wasn't a show, Matteo. It was my work. 5 years, Elara. 5 years of this lying to my face every single day. I never lied to you," she said, her voice perfectly level. "You simply never asked. You told me who I was. You told me I was simple. You told me I was decorative. You told me my errands were buying shoes. You saw what you wanted to see, a mirror for your own ego. My money. You used my money to build this," he accused, his voice rising in desperation. Elara actually laughed. It was not her soft, polite titter. It was a sharp, cold, genuine sound of amusement. It was the laugh of a predator. "Your money," she said. "Matteo, I haven't touched your bank account or that ridiculous allowance since our first anniversary. I've been paying my own share of this penthouse, this car, these trips for 4 years. By routing the funds through a shell company that you thought was a tax write-off. Your accountants never even noticed." She leaned forward. "My errands were board meetings in Zurich. My charity luncheons were final negotiations with my investors in Singapore. My fitting today. It was signing the final acquisition papers for TerraTech, the company you were trying to buy." The elevator to the penthouse chimed. The doors opened. He was home, but it was no longer his. He stalked into the living room, grabbing the decanter of Macallan. He needed a drink. He needed to think. "So what now?" he demanded, pouring a glass. "You move your office in here. You expect me to just, what, be Mr. Vance?" "No," she said. She wasn't following him. She had stopped by the hall closet. She pulled out a sleek, dark suitcase. It was already packed. Matteo froze. What is that? Where are you going? I'm not going anywhere, Elara said, setting the suitcase by the door. I'm staying in my apartment, the one I own in Soho near my actual office. You are the one with a problem. A problem You told me I was nothing without your name, she said, walking toward him, her voice a clinical, precise blade. You told me I came from nothing. You laughed at my father's legacy. You stood in this very room and called me a vacuous wife. Elara, I was stressed. The market. I didn't mean... You did, she said, stopping just feet from him. You meant every word. The only reason you're backtracking now is because you've seen my bank balance. You don't respect me, Matteo. You respect money. And you just realized I have more of it than you ever will. He saw his mistake. His company was leveraged. She was liquid. He needed her. He shifted tactics. Elara, darling, be reasonable, he said, trying for a conciliatory tone. Think of what we could do together. Blackwood and Vance. We could be unstoppable. We could merge. We love each other. She looked at him. The pity was back, sharp and devastating. Love, you don't love me. You loved the idea of me. You loved owning me. But the most valuable thing you owned just walked out of its cage. She walked to the door. And as for merging, she paused, her hand on the handle. You should probably call your CFO. A cold dread deeper than anything he'd felt at the gala seized him. Why? Blackwood Capital is over-leveraged, Matteo. You made bad bets on commercial real estate. Your investors are nervous. You needed the TerraTech deal to calm them. You needed the gala to look strong. You have neither. How do you know that? He whispered. Because while you were busy researching Serafina Rodriguez, I was busy becoming your primary creditor. He dropped his glass. The Macallan, 25. His symbol of power shattered on the marble floor. What, Vance Ethel, through a subsidiary in the Cayman Islands, bought your debt last week. All of it. The $800 million you owe to Deutsche Bank and the Hong Kong consortium. I own it. She opened the door. Her COO, Julian Hayes, was standing outside next to a private security guard. Matteo Blackwood. Julian said, his voice polite but firm. You'll be receiving a call from our legal team at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be discussing the new terms of your loans. I'd advise you to be cooperative. Matteo was speechless. He was ruined. He wasn't just married to a powerful woman. He wasn't just out-negotiated by her. He worked for her. Elara looked back at him, a final appraising glance at the man who had laughed at her. He was small, pathetic, drowning in a penthouse he could no longer afford. The problem, Matteo, she said, her voice soft, is that you always assumed you were the most important person in the room. You never stopped to wonder if you were. She turned and walked out. The door clicked shut, the sound of a vault ceiling. Matteo Blackwood was left alone in the silent penthouse, his empire in ashes destroyed by the one person he never even saw. And just like that, the gilded Saturn was empty and the king was left with nothing but his own echo. Elara Vance didn't just build her own table. She bought the entire building. This story is a powerful reminder that you should never, ever underestimate the person sitting quietly next to you. The ones who move in silence are often the ones making the most powerful moves. What did you think of Matteo's reaction? Was Elara's revenge too harsh, or was it perfectly served? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you loved this story and want more tales of dramatic twists and just desserts, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.